The lights of Madison Square Garden buzzed and gleamed like a living thing, casting sharp beams over the sold-out arena. The air crackled with a feverish energy, a restless anticipation sweeping through the crowd as if they were on the verge of witnessing something that would be etched into the sport's history forever. Thousands of fans packed the seats, their voices blending into a thunderous, unending roar. It was the kind of excitement that didn't just hang in the air. It pounded against your chest, rippled down your spine, and left you bracing for what came next. For weeks, the sports world had been rattled by the announcement. Mike Tyson, the ferocious boxer who redefined brutality and precision, was stepping back into the ring. But this wasn't just another comeback against a rising contender or a veteran seeking one last shot at glory. This was a showdown against an unexpected opponent, John Cena. The man who had spent years building his legacy in the world of professional wrestling, where spectacle often mingled with genuine athleticism. Some called it a circus act, a promotional stunt meant to squeeze dollars from spectacle-hungry fans. Others saw it as something else entirely, a clash of titans from different worlds, united by their hunger to prove something not just to the world, but to themselves. Tyson, despite his age, carried with him an aura of menace that could chill the most hardened fighters. The stories of his devastating knockouts had turned him into something more than a man. He was a legend, a predator who tore through the heavyweight division like a force of nature. But there was something deeper driving him this time, something he rarely spoke about but could never fully hide. It wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming the edge he felt slipping away as the years stretched on, about proving to himself that the beast within him still had its fangs. And then there was Cena. To the untrained eye, his roots in professional wrestling marked him as little more than an entertainer. But anyone who underestimated him did so at their own peril. Beneath the carefully crafted persona and the playful catchphrases was a man forged by relentless discipline. Cena had spent his entire career defying expectations, pushing himself beyond his limits, and confronting doubt head-on. In his mind, this fight wasn't just a curiosity. It was a challenge, a test against one of the most feared men in combat sports. Their worlds couldn't have been more different. Tyson, known for his viciousness in the boxing ring, where every punch carried the intent to break bones and willpower alike. Cena, shaped by the spectacle of wrestling, where athleticism and performance blended into something almost theatrical. But Cena had no illusions about the fight he had signed up for. There would be no choreography here, no scripted endings or dramatic pauses for the crowd's delight. This was real, and he was stepping into a realm where mistakes were punished, not by jeers from the audience, but by the sting of iron fists. Their press conferences were spectacles in themselves, an intoxicating mix of bravado, subtle digs, and calculated respect. Tyson's words were blunt, stripped of any flair or pretense. He made no effort to mask his intentions. He was coming to fight, to tear apart whatever defense Cena could muster, and to prove that a man who thrived on scripted battles couldn't survive where the only script was survival. Cena, in contrast, spoke with the polished confidence of someone used to commanding a crowd. But his eyes betrayed something more, a simmering determination to prove that he was more than just an entertainer. Critics dissected every moment, every word exchanged between them. Some called it a mismatch, a desperate grasp at relevancy for both men. Others hailed it as a bold experiment, a cross-sport showdown that could either end in a predictable massacre or an unexpected masterpiece. Fans chose their sides with the kind of passion that bordered on obsession. Tyson loyalists swore that the boxer's power and precision would shatter Cena's will within the first round. Cena's supporters countered with faith in their hero's endurance and adaptability. The internet buzzed with predictions and fantasy scenarios, everyone eager to claim they saw the outcome coming before the first punch was even thrown. As fight night drew closer, both men buried themselves in preparation. Tyson returned to his roots, training with a fury that seemed to defy his age. His workouts were grueling, designed to rekindle the primal force that had once made him the most feared man in boxing. Every punch he threw sounded like a gunshot. Every session, a battle against the creeping fatigue of years gone by. His trainers spoke of a new intensity in his eyes, a hunger that bordered on desperation. Cena, meanwhile, sought out experts from the boxing world, molding his body and instincts for a different kind of fight. His conditioning became relentless, his focus sharper than it had ever been. There were whispers that he had turned away from wrestling altogether, dedicating himself entirely to mastering the art of pure combat. His willingness to embrace pain and keep moving forward became the cornerstone of his preparation. To him, the fight wasn't just about pride or money. It was a chance to prove himself in an arena where no one expected him to thrive. The night of the fight arrived, and the energy was unlike anything Madison Square Garden had experienced in years. As Tyson made his way to the ring, the crowd's roar swelled to an almost deafening pitch. His eyes remained locked on the path ahead, his face unreadable. Cena followed moments later, his entrance marked by a different kind of electricity, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and outright disbelief. When the two men finally stood across from each other, the contrast was striking. Tyson's frame was still imposing, his fists clenched like weapons ready to be unleashed. Cena's build was powerful, but leaner than it had ever been, sculpted by months of brutal preparation. The referee's voice cut through the noise, issuing the final instructions before the opening bell. But both men seemed deaf to anything beyond the moment. The bell rang. Tyson lunged forward, his fists firing with the same savage precision that had made him a legend. But Cena didn't crumble. Instead, he absorbed the initial onslaught with a resilience that left the crowd stunned. He moved, adapted, his eyes locked onto Tyson's every motion. It was clear from the outset this wasn't just a spectacle. It was a real fight. Tyson's fists crashed against Cena's guard with the kind of violence that drew gasps from the audience. It was like witnessing a sledgehammer relentlessly pounding against steel. Yet, Cena absorbed the blows, his movements calculated and precise, weaving just enough to lessen the impact. His eyes never left Tyson's, even when the punches came faster than seemed possible. It wasn't just endurance keeping him in the fight. It was something colder, something planned. Tyson pressed forward, driven by instinct and fury, his attacks merciless and unrelenting. His fans chanted his name, voices filled with a fervor that bordered on hysteria. The crowd expected Cena to fold any moment now, to collapse under the pressure of those monstrous punches. But minute after minute, he refused to break. His footwork had improved, gliding around Tyson's advances with a fluidity that no one had anticipated. As the first round wore on, Cena's resilience began to look less like mere toughness and more like a strategy. Between rounds, Tyson's corner urged him to pace himself, to box instead of brawl. But Tyson's pride bristled at the thought of changing his approach for a man he considered an outsider. He had come to destroy, to crush, to reaffirm his legend. Anything less would feel like defeat. So, when the bell rang to start the second round, Tyson unleashed his fury once again. His punches thundered through the air, raw power unleashed with every swing. Cena ducked beneath a vicious hook and countered with a stiff jab that snapped Tyson's head back. The crowd erupted, startled by the precision of the strike. It wasn't just a desperate swing or a lucky shot. It was a move crafted by someone who had studied his opponent's rhythm with almost obsessive focus. Tyson's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise flashing across his expression before it hardened back into a predator's gaze. Something had shifted. Tyson could feel it, even if the crowd hadn't caught on yet. Cena was no longer simply surviving. He was fighting back, and with a level of skill Tyson hadn't expected. And for the first time that night, the audience's cheers weren't only for the boxer. A smattering of Cena's supporters began to chant, their voices cutting through the chaos like blades. Tyson doubled down, his fists striking with the kind of force that had ended countless careers. Yet, For every crushing blow, Cena answered with speed and precision, his footwork bewildering, his counters more frequent. It became clear that Cena hadn't come to survive. He had come to win. And his strategy was designed to exploit something Tyson had never considered. A man who had trained himself for brutality was being forced to adapt to a fight built on finesse and timing. As the rounds wore on, the tension only grew. Tyson's power remained daunting, but his frustration began to bleed through. The crowd sensed it too, the initial certainty of a swift knockout now giving way to something far more unpredictable. Sweat poured from both fighters, their bodies glistening under the harsh lights. Each exchange left the audience breathless, eyes locked onto the ring as if missing a single second would be unforgivable. Cena's resilience became a weapon of its own. With each round, his confidence grew, his strikes sharper, his dodges more effortless. Tyson's relentless offense was gradually losing its sting, his breathing heavier, his swings slower. But Tyson was still Tyson, and even the smallest mistake could lead to disaster. Cena knew it, his eyes darting between Tyson's shoulders and fists, reading each movement with a level of focus that bordered on obsession. But then, something happened that left the audience stunned. Midway through the fifth round, Tyson landed a brutal left hook that caught Cena flush on the jaw. The force of it sent Cena sprawling to the canvas, the shock of the impact rippling through the arena like a gunshot. Referees scrambled to begin the count, their voices loud and urgent. The crowd erupted in a frenzy, Tyson's fans howling with triumph, certain that the end had finally come. But even as the count reached 6, Cena's hands were already clawing at the canvas, his chest heaving as he forced himself up. The count reached 8 when Cena rose to his feet, eyes blazing with a determination that bordered on madness. The referee checked him, searching for signs of damage, but Cena nodded with a fierce insistence that he was ready to continue. Tyson charged forward, smelling blood and eager to finish what he'd started. But Cena was waiting, his body coiled like a spring. As Tyson lunged in, Cena dodged and countered with a brutal combination that snapped Tyson's head to the side. For the first time that night, Tyson stumbled, his footing momentarily lost. The crowd gasped, their voices caught between cheers and disbelief. The commentators scrambled to make sense of it all, their voices overlapping as they tried to capture the madness unfolding before them. Tyson's power was still terrifying, but Cena's resilience had turned the fight into something else entirely. It was no longer just about brute strength. It was about grit, adaptation, and the will to keep moving forward, even when every nerve screamed to quit. As the fight continued, the unexpected became the norm. Cena's counters grew sharper, his attacks more daring. Tyson responded with savage aggression, his fists finding their marks with punishing regularity. But with each round, the tide seemed to shift ever so slightly. The invincible predator now faced an opponent who refused to bend, no matter how fierce the assault. Then, something strange occurred. As the 7th round began, Tyson's punches lost a hint of their ferocity. His arms moved slower, his breathing labored. The audience noticed, their whispers rising in waves. Cena pressed forward, his own strikes landing more frequently, his energy seemingly boundless. Tyson tried to respond, but his movements lacked the precision that had once defined him. Somewhere deep within Tyson's mind, doubt began to creep in. It was a sensation he hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. Cena had not only survived his onslaught but had forced him into unfamiliar territory. And it wasn't just the physical exhaustion. It was the realization that his opponent had studied him, predicted his every move, and prepared for a war of attrition. Cena, sensing the shift, pushed even harder. The crowd's roars grew deafening, the division between Tyson's supporters and Cena's fans dissolving into a single frenzied mass. This wasn't the fight anyone expected. And now, with the 8th round looming, it was clear that something remarkable was happening. Tyson's eyes flickered with something that bordered on desperation as the bell rang. But Cena's expression remained resolute, a steely calm that hinted at something deeper. something Tyson couldn't quite grasp. And as they stepped back into the fray, everyone watching knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. By the time the 8th round began, the audience had become a restless sea of disbelief and admiration. Tyson's fury had been met with something far more unyielding than brute strength and unwavering will forged from years of adapting to adversity. Cena was breathing hard, sweat streaming down his body, but his eyes still held that relentless focus. Whatever punishment Tyson dished out, Cena absorbed it, processed it, and retaliated with precision. Tyson advanced again, swinging with the force of a man desperate to reclaim the momentum that had been slipping through his fingers. His fists still carried devastating power, but his endurance had begun to erode, chipped away by a battle that had gone far longer than he'd expected. The world watched, captivated by the sight of two titans pushing beyond their limits. Tyson's ferocity clashed with Cena's resilience. The contrast between them, a spectacle no one could turn away from. But as the 9th round unfolded, something shifted. Tyson's strikes grew less frequent, his breathing labored and his footwork sluggish. Cena sensed the opportunity, his own energy somehow revitalized by the knowledge that the man who had seemed untouchable was now showing signs of fatigue. Cena's attacks sharpened, his punches landing with a precision that brought Tyson's head snapping back repeatedly. Every jab and hook Cena delivered seemed to carry more weight, his strikes like needles finding their way through Tyson's armor. And then, with a brutal uppercut that stunned the audience, Cena staggered Tyson for the first time. The impact was unmistakable, Tyson's knees buckling ever so slightly before he recovered. The crowd roared, the sound thunderous and wild, disbelief now giving way to a mounting excitement. Tyson tried to respond with a vicious cross, but his timing was off, his strength depleted by the endless exchanges. Cena slipped the punch, his instincts taking over as he retaliated with a combination that drove Tyson back. The invincible legend was now struggling to keep pace, his eyes flickering with an emotion the world had never associated with him: doubt. As the final round approached, it became clear that Tyson's strategy had failed. Cena had worn him down, not through power alone but with a methodical approach designed to dismantle Tyson's strengths. Tyson's punches, once terrifying in their brutality, now seemed slower, their force diminished. The crowd's allegiance had shifted, their cheers now an unpredictable mix of admiration for both men. When the bell rang for the 10th and final round, Cena's expression remained steady, his body somehow still moving with that unnerving combination of grace and determination. Tyson, breathing hard and fighting against his own exhaustion, advanced with a desperation that seemed to defy logic. His fists flew, but Cena countered and dodged with an ease that bordered on mastery. And then it happened. Tyson overextended himself with a wild hook, his body tilting off balance for just a split second. Cena seized the moment, unleashing a devastating right cross that connected cleanly with Tyson's jaw. The sound of it cracked through the arena, silencing the crowd in a heartbeat. Tyson crumbled to the canvas, his body folding beneath him as if every ounce of strength had been drained away. Referees scrambled to begin the count, their voices ringing out over the stunned audience. Tyson's eyes fluttered, his hands twitching as he tried to push himself up. But his body refused to cooperate, the toll of the fight finally claiming its price. The count reached 10, and with it, the unthinkable became reality. Cena had not only survived, but had triumphed over one of the most feared fighters in history. The audience erupted in a frenzy, a mixture of applause, disbelief, and sheer exhilaration. Cena stood in the center of the ring, his chest heaving as he took in the moment. The world's perception of him had been shattered and rebuilt in a single night. This wasn't just a victory, it was a declaration that his determination and adaptability had proven more formidable than Tyson's power. Reporters swarmed the ring, their microphones thrust toward Cena as they fired questions at him. But Cena's gaze remained distant, his mind still processing what had just happened. As he spoke, his voice was steady, free of arrogance. He acknowledged Tyson's power, praised him as a legend, and admitted that the fight had been the most grueling test of his life. But beneath the humility, there was a quiet certainty, a knowledge that he had earned his place among the greats. And then, as the cameras continued to capture every word, Tyson approached. His expression was unreadable, his steps slow but deliberate. The crowd hushed, their anticipation a living thing. Tyson extended his hand, his eyes locking onto Cena's with a respect that could not be faked. Cena accepted the gesture, their handshake lingering for a moment longer than expected. But Tyson wasn't finished. With the microphone in hand, his voice cut through the arena with a resonance that commanded silence. He admitted that he had underestimated Cena, that his pride had blinded him to the truth. And then, with a grin that was equal parts admiration and challenge, Tyson announced that he wanted a rematch. The crowd roared, the prospect of another clash between the two titans igniting a frenzy of anticipation. Cena nodded, his smile genuine, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The rivalry had just been born, and the world would be watching every step of the way. As the cameras continued to roll, Tyson left the ring with his head held high, the defeat tempered by a newfound respect for his opponent. And Cena, standing in the center of the ring, knew that this victory was only the beginning. Whatever came next, he was ready for it.